Hi there, it's Alan Garrett with another episode of Out of the Bags. This time we're going to look at Tales to Astonish 1 to 101, the entire run, with stories, of course, on how I acquired them. First issue, acquired many years ago. I had never seen it before, and of course, it's far from perfect, but it's complete, and it's dated January of 1959. It was one of the first newer books that Jack Kirby came back and worked on. Steve Ditko did the cover of number 2. It was the only Steve Ditko cover. Everything else, up until a certain point, was Jack Kirby. And then later on, Larry Lieber, Don Heck, and so on and so forth. So, how I acquired these? Well, I started collecting comics in 1970, coming up on my 50th anniversary, as a matter of fact. And back in the day, a 9 and 10-year-old, 11 and 12-year-old, you had two ways of getting comics, either walking or biking. And that's what I did. By the way, I went to more yard sales and flea markets in the 70s than any of my other friends. And I think a lot of my friends thought it was weird. But I knew that there were comics out there. The ironic thing is, the comics that were available in 1971 and 72 at flea markets were, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, which to me at the time seemed old. Of course, nowadays you're going to go to yard sales, you're going to find a lot of books that are maybe from the 90s or from the turn of the century. So that makes sense. Anyway, I used to bike everywhere. And if I got even a slight hint of a comic book, and a lot more times I was disappointed than I was excited. But I would always run into these things, which fascinated me because I didn't quite understand Tales to Astonish and of Suspense and Strange Tales and Journey into Mystery until I got my first Robert Bell price guide early in 1972, and I started ordering from him. Of course, dealers back then would have conditions such as fine to mint, which usually meant you got VG or fine. These books vary in grade. Some are in really nice grade, others not so much, but they're all complete. So I biked everywhere, and I grew up in Wharton, New Jersey, and I biked around Wharton and Dover and Denville and Mine Hill and anywhere my bike would take me to. Most of the books were 25 cents. And the neat thing is, some of these books, and I'm going to find a book in a little bit that will show you, people would write on the back cover, dealers, if it were 10 cents or 20 cents, what they wanted. And that's how when you went to a comic shop or a bookstore, it would be written on the cover. And I'll find a book in just a moment. These are classic pre-hero Marvels: Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Joe Sinnott, Don Heck, Larry Lieber. Most written by Stan Lee. I think years ago I showed Tales to Astonish, not out of the bags, but I stopped at like issue 35 or something like that. Some of these are considered prototypes, and some are loosely based on some of the Marvel heroes. But back to biking. Biking meant a tremendous amount to me, and I biked everywhere. I mean, I think that's why I was so thin as a kid, especially on a Saturday morning. When I left the house, I left good and early, and as long as I got back by dinner, this guy was not punished. But we did have a strict rule in our house about being back on time. Oh, here's a date stamp. Cougar Comics. Love my date stamps. Okay, this was one of the few books I did not have that my wife bought me in '92 for $40. So that was a big purchase for me. Complete. Got a VG. Oh, and the group book, I had a coverless copy and upgraded that many years later, but the coverless copy was probably a nickel. Still trying to find that little written 10 cents in there that a lot of times they would do. Yeah, I probably won't because I've been talking about it. But anyway, I biked all from here to Kingdom Come, like most kids did. And in sixth grade, when I was 11 years old, my dad helped me paint my bike, showed me how to paint my bike, and I put new handlebars on it and a new banana seat and really spruced it up, made it look really good. So good, in fact, that somebody else wanted it. And that was the first experience I ever had with someone stealing something. I had parked it at school. There was a big playground there. It was Marie V. Duffy Elementary School. And I went into the woods to play and came out, and it was gone. So at 11 years old, I started second guessing myself and wondering, well, maybe I didn't bring it here. Maybe I had it at home. I went home. Then I went to my best friend Paul Sanko's house because I thought, well, maybe I had it at Paul's house. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I was talking about how much I paid for some of these. A lot of times dealers back in the 60s and 70s would put down what they wanted. I don't know if you can quite make that out, if it's focusing or not. That says 10 cents. Oh, it says $1. Okay, I'm wrong. It's $1. So usually dealers would pencil things on the back, how much they wanted for them. That was $1. That was probably outrageous in the 70s. But my bike was stolen, and I was devastated because I couldn't imagine anybody would steal something that belonged to somebody else. But it happened. So my dad, out of his generosity, got me my first 10-speed bike because he said, well, you were too old for that bike anyway. Oh, and by the way, I did go to the police and reported it, and I was some stupid 11-year-old kid I don't think anybody took serious. And so I got my 10-speed bike. I held onto that 10-speed bike till I was in college. It was I think it was a Huffy. And I took that thing everywhere. I biked. I mean, I took long road trips. And, man, that was just a great bike. I loved it. Probably the death of my biking days happened when I got my driver's license. In New Jersey, it was 17. And I still biked a little bit, but hey, why bike when you could drive? And that was my attitude. And I was able to open up other doors and corridors for me to hunt down comics. But I genuinely miss the days of biking because I always biked with a backpack. Had a little backpack, a little short, almost like a book sack. And I had a particular way that I would keep my comics, and I would keep them stored in a notebook. Whenever I was picking them up, if I was going to bookstores or paper stores, I made doggone sure that I did not get them crumpled or anything. We're looking at Tales to Astonish 1 to 100. Trying to go as fast as I can. This was a collection that I started picking up in the early 70s and pretty much wrapped it up in the 80s. Probably 86 when books became $1 or $1.50 a piece. I thought that was a little high, but it was what it was. Weather's starting to cool down in North Carolina and Virginia, and glad to see it. Glad to see it. These are all complete books. There's no coupons missing, no pages missing. One of my favorite ones right there. Probably Spider-Man's 11th appearance. It wasn't a big deal at that point, but something like that. Still, it's nice to see Jack Kirby drawing Spider-Man. Certainly not his first time or his last time. So they make the announcement. Let me see if that has still no luck there. They make the announcement at the end of this story that the Hulk would be the new double feature in Tales to Astonish. And one of my all-time favorite covers is that cover. Cover of issue number 60. Steve Ditko took over the art for the Hulk, and it ran all the way to the end. However, at this point, Giant Man's days were numbered in the book. Giant Man and Ant-Man were one of those characters that never got a lot of respect. By the way, this book, for some reason, is a tough book to find because it's got a pinup inside of it, and people love to rip out that pinup. And no, I'm not going to be able to find it, of course. But you have to be careful with some of the books with pinups. There we go. There's the pinup. Kirby. Anyway, you have to look at some of the Marvel books because they would do these wonderful pinups, and a lot of times they go missing. And that's never a good thing. And yes, I've been on the receiving end of that a few times, but that was many, many years ago. You learn to, when you get your books, to look at them, count the pages, look for restoration. And I understand CGC and graded books are really good because they do all that work for you, but whew, at a premium. And I'm not that kind of a collector anyway. I'm not an investor. I collect my books simply for the sheer joy of just having the collections. That's another book that's hard to get in a higher grade because of the black cover. That book, years ago, was speculated as the true Submariner #1 in the Silver Age. Never really did anything. It bumped it up a little bit, but not a tremendous amount, but a good story. Gil Kane did a lot of work on that, or Gene Colan, excuse me, did a lot of great work on that. We're looking at Tales to Astonish 1-101, moving through it as quickly as I can. That was a big one when it came out. The announcement that Bruce Banner is the Hulk. They were like, son of a gun, it makes sense. I mean, they both wear purple pants. So my job at the radio station has gotten a little easier because we spent a good amount of time putting on a news talk radio station. So now we have 8 different stations just in my neck of the woods with 8 different formats. And it keeps me running, but not as much as when you're trying to put on a station and all of that goes with it. I work with some really great people, some of the best people I've ever worked with in radio. And of course, the big joke is the owner of all the stations is John Byrne. He had no idea there's a comic artist, writer, creator, but with the same name, nor, I suspect, does he care. But I told him anyway. We're almost done. Forever, these issues were 75 cents. Even in the 80s, they were 75 cents. Mid to high grade. Low grade, they were 25 cents. And they're not hard to get now, but they're not 75 cents anymore. And I got them a long time ago, early on. Finished it, like I said, by the mid-80s. Or so, and I'm glad I did. Same thing with Tales of Suspense. I finished that set at the same time, probably in the mid-80s. Same thing with Strange Tales, same thing with Journey into Mystery. I went after all of those first because they were all cheap books, very cheap. Oh, there it is. First Silver Surfer cover outside of the Fantastic Four. Going forward. And we're almost there. Appreciate your patience. Appreciate you watching too and listening. Always a tough book to find, especially in a higher grade. And I acquired this probably from eBay because the other book I had, which I acquired 40 or 50 years earlier, was just not in very good condition. And then finally, next issue, of course, becomes Hulk 102. And that's my episode of After Comics. And I thank you for watching and listening.